with Rubex, and today we are here to talk about one of the most important topics for class 12th, that is the menstrual cycle. So let's just begin by introducing the topic for you. So what do we have? We have the menstrual cycle. Class 2 would have been funny. Yeah. So we have the menstrual cycle. Menstrual cycle is an event which occurs in the absence of pregnancy in females, and it involves the shedding of the endometrial lining along with blood and mucus from the body of the female. So just to introduce with the definition for menstrual cycle, I'm going to mention it right here. Menstrual cycle occurs in all primate mammals. So not just humans, it is occurring in all the primate mammals, right? And it involves the shedding of the endometrial lining of uterus, that is blood and mucus. So this is what is let out from the body. And when does it occur? It occurs in the absence of pregnancy. So when there is no pregnancy, there is no fertilization, that is when this cycle would be occurring inside the primate females. Okay. Oh, I should correct this over here. Female mammals, right? Only the female mammals. So that's one important thing. Okay. So what is the start of the menstrual cycle known as now? The start of it is known as menarche. Okay, menarche, that is the beginning of it, or the start, that is when it starts. It occurs around, it varies, it occurs around 11 to 13 years of age in all females, that is when it begins. Okay, and so that is kind of like the start, and that is when it first happens. The ending of the menstrual cycle is known as menopause. That is when it stops occurring, when it ends. And when does it end? That also varies in different females, but it varies from 45 to 50 years of age. Start, which is known as menarche, and end, which is known as menopause. Okay, so the menstrual cycle actually has some different phases, and we can just have a brief introduction to what all these phases are. So the first phase of the menstrual cycle is known as the menstrual phase. Menstrual phase has a duration of 3 to 5 days. This is when the actual blood loss takes place. Okay, and this is where actually the endometrial lining sheds and it is removed from the body. Okay. This particular phase experiences low hormonal levels in the body of the female, that is the sex hormones are at a low during this time. I think I messed up the spelling a little. Yeah, let's just make it fine. So low hormonal levels in females during this phase particularly occurs. This is about the menstrual phase, which is the actual phase where the blood loss takes place. After this, the second phase that we have is the follicular phase. What does this phase suggest? By the name, it suggests that the follicles will be developing during this phase. So for example, we have the primary follicle. We all know that the primary follicle undergoes different stages of development. It first changes into the secondary follicle, and by the end it has fully matured into the Graafian follicle, that is the fully matured follicle inside the ovary. So this is the phase where this occurs, and this Graafian follicle starts to secrete hormones. So the levels of the hormones like LH, FSH, estrogen, the levels of these hormones begins to rise during the follicular phase. Follicular phase, what happens now is that during mid-cycle, since we know that these cycles are commonly lasting for 28 days, that is, they repeat at an average of 28 days. So during mid-cycle, that is the 14th day of the cycle, there is an event which is known as the LH surge. During this particular day, the LH levels are at their most highs, and what happens is that the Graafian follicle, it bursts to release the ovum. Okay, and what is this event known as? This event is known as ovulation, because this is the point where the egg is released. Once the egg is released, starts the next phase, that is the luteal phase. Luteal phase is the one which continues for the second half of the cycle. What happens here is that the remains of the Graafian follicle are changed, and they are the ones which are responsible for secretion of hormones thereafter. Okay, and what is that called? The thing that is formed, that is known as corpus luteum. So just to tell you what corpus luteum is, better off to write with the text box. So we can say that the remnants of the Graafian follicle form the corpus luteum. It continues to secrete hormones, right? Then after these phases are complete, if there is no fertilization, in the absence of pregnancy, that is fertilization, the endometrial lining sheds. It will obviously start shedding, and a new cycle begins. So this is what happens. A new cycle begins right after the 28 days are over and there is the absence of any type of fertilization. Okay, understanding it better with the help of an image. Got added in the wrong place. Let's try something else. I hope it turns out fine now. I don't get it. Let's just add it on a blank sheet only. Yeah, perfect now. We're just going to go over it with the help of this diagram. So if you see, first phase, menstruation, lasting for 3 to 5 days. Follicular phase or the proliferative phase, that is where your follicles are developing, lasting up to the 13th day. You can see this surge of hormone LH mid-cycle, that is on the 14th day of the cycle, mid-cycle surge. Okay, after that, what continues for the second half of the cycle is the luteal phase, and after the 28 to 29 days being completed, the next cycle begins. Let's just see the level of hormones now. So progesterone maintains a pretty constant level. Progesterone surge is seen during the luteal phase. As you can see, progesterone levels are quite high during the luteal phase and then they fall immediately. It is this fall in progesterone which causes menstruation. Because progesterone falls so extensively is why the endometrial lining starts to shed. Estrogen is high again during the 14th day of the cycle. It is a little high along with LH, that is. After that, it is also high towards the end of the cycle, but then decreases when the new cycle is beginning. So it is high during your towards the end of your cycle. Ovulation events. Now you have your follicle, you had your primary follicle, starts developing into the mature follicle known as the Graafian follicle. You can see that your Graafian follicle has burst to release the egg, and this is where the LH surge has taken place. There is a surge in the level of LH. The remnants of this follicle are going to form the corpus luteum. corpus luteum is the source of hormones. Because there was no fertilization here, there is no fertilization, what happens? The corpus luteum begins to regress matlab it degenerates. Because उसका कोई रोल ही नहीं बचा बॉडी में, it begins to degenerate. Because it degenerates, the hormonal levels fall, as you can see here. LH and FSH levels are pretty constant throughout the cycle, only that there is an LH surge seen on the 14th day. So this is kind of like a graph. You can also see about the endometrial lining. There is menses, that is the flow of blood. Right, so there is this flow of blood occurring during the first 3 to 5 days, that is during the menstrual phase. After that, you can see that the endometrial lining is developing. It's increasing more and more, and finally in the next cycle, again what begins? Menses, that is the loss of blood in the form of, or loss of the endometrial lining in the form of blood and mucus. This diagrammatic representation from NCERT is a very nice graphical thing which represents menstruation, and you could all refer to this from your books also, and I hope I was able to make it clear for you all. So best wishes. Doubts are more than welcome. You can all put up your doubts in the comments and they'll be answered, and all the best everyone.